The movement in Awakening, and certainly in the first section, both sections, definitely come from my training. You know, I see reflections of one of my teachers, Carolyn Adams, who was a principal dancer with the Paul Taylor company, and she was my teacher, obviously, at Juilliard. And so I see a lot of the use of the back coming from that. I also see the influence of Martha Graham in the movement. You know, some of the sense of using the torso and contracting and releasing. And certainly I see reflections, especially it's in two sections, the second section, of Alvin Ailey and his use of drama, rhythm, weight in the body. And then I also see the influence of martial arts in it. Some of the angular movements where they're running forward and then the hands slice across the front of the body, which was a lot what we learned when we were blocking, you know, someone striking at you and you slice down to block. So that's very much a part of my work that sort of remain. Some of the overwhelming nature of the drama, I think, comes out of things that I witnessed as a child. You know, in Liberty City, I was a kid when I saw a couple of riots that happened in Liberty City. That sense of tension just before something explodes, which usually is whatever act that, in a way, inspires people to take to the street in anger. I remember that feeling. And I remember what the neighborhood felt like. It's sort of, I can remember there being an uneasy calm, but we knew what was about to happen. And when you look at the first section of Awakening, the running and the darting, I see a lot of that kind. My mother reminded me of that because she just saw the work herself. And so that sense of chaos, that sense of the leader being born out of the chaos, the womb is the community, and out of the womb of the community comes the reluctant warrior who would rather, in the first section, this character who is Jamar, who's also a Miami native and a graduate of New World School of the Arts, but brilliant dancer, who keeps being born out of the group, but he stays attached to the group as he circles with this mass of people, which is, to me, the umbilical cord of the group. And then he keeps being sort of born back into the group because he's not ready. But by the second section, he's sort of being anointed and eventually exalted. But that comes from my church upbringing. That comes from watching the preacher, especially during the sermon, watching how the preacher, especially when you think of quite bluntly, black preachers, there's a certain cadence, there's a certain rhythm that I'm sure comes from Africa. That sense of call and response comes from the residue of what we know of our own culture. And what I remember is watching the preacher sort of and listening to the beginning of the sermon was always sort of pedantic, you know, and sort of factual, what's in the Bible, what it says. Then as he starts to expound on the words, the rhythm would change in his voice and the tone would change to almost sing-songy thing. Then it would sort of escalate to a sort of urgency. And then by the end, everybody was sort of one and into the word. And if you watch the Jamar character, it has that same sort of cadence. And by the end, when they're all in a clump, facing the back, and they start reaching to the side, and he sort of is gesturing toward them. He's sort of leading the congregation, or he's a conductor leading a choir, and their voices are shouting. And by the end, they circle him as the leader. And as he pulls the energy down into himself, when he falls on the floor at the end, he expels it out to the congregation and the universe. So that was the kinds of thematic things that are very much a part of my growing up here in Miami that are embedded in Awakenings.